my opinion, it's extremely important to set up your own item filter so you know your way around what is happening, what is shown, what is being hidden, and you can also fine-tune it on the fly. In this video, I'm going to explain to you how you can set up 3 item filters that are in ascending strictness from each other that is going to evolve while you are evolving the build as well. For this, we are going to open up our loot filter. We are going to create a new one. So for example, I'll call it test right here. And then we are going to add several rules that I always use in all of my filters. The first one, and probably the most important one, is going to be something that I call the master affix group. For this, I'm also going to rename this to the master affix. I usually add a lot of dashes to it just for the master affix group so that I can find it much quicker. And then we are going to show the stuff, and now we're going to go and add the affix, and we can now choose literally every affix that our build is going to need. So for example, let's say we are a melee that scales with critical strike chance, physical damage, and attack speed, and we are also in need of all the health stuff, and we also need cold res and lightning res and all the other reses. And so in this way, we are going to go through all of the categories and tick all the stuff that we need. So ideally, you should end up around 35 to 45 of the affixes here in this master affix group. I have seen that more or less are making these item filter too strict or not strict enough. What can also really help you is when you are maybe already looking at a Maxroll guide or also a guide from another content creator, you can check out which of the item stats are going to be required for your character in the game. For example, this character, which is a Shadow Dagger Rogue by McFluffin, for example, really relies on multiple affixes. For example, crit multi, melee fizz. We also need throwing damage, fizz res, crit avoidance, hybrid health, and this way you can make a mental list, for example, that you can then take back into the game and then fill out your master affix group very efficiently. And then we are going to add the next rule, which is going to be a hide all of the other classes stuff, because I'm a solo self-found player. I don't want to really trade my stuff away, and I also generally want to find my own stuff for the build that I'm currently playing. Obviously, when I find a unique or a set item, I still want to see those. This is where the third rule comes into play, for example, where I want to show the rarity, in this case the uniques and the sets, and it's really important that this one is above the hide all for the other classes. Now, we already set up 3 rules very quickly. Again, the master affix group, really important, is going to be much more than I have here, around 35 to 45. And then next up is going to be a rule that is focused on removal and shattering. For this, you are going to duplicate your master affix group, because this one obviously has already all of the very important stats inside of it. This is where this one is basically going to function as a template for the next steps that we are going to do. In this case, we are going to call this removal / shattering, for example, and then you are going to recolor this to a color that basically functions for you as a type of removal or shattering. For me, this color is red. I know that every time I see something red, this is basically something that I need to either shatter or have a more look at, and then maybe even removal if the affix is a little bit better. In this case, you are going to update this one, and now you have your first removal / shattering group, and now you are going to duplicate exactly this one, because what we're now going to do is we are going to bump this up to 2, and we're then going to emphasize it. So in this case, you now know that the ones that are red and lowercase are going to be just 1 affix that you need, and then the emphasized ones are going to be at the very least already 2. So these are more valuable to shatter for you than the ones before. Now, a really important rule, and that is literally hide everything. And this one obviously is not allowed to be at the top, but what we're going to do is we will click this burger icon here, and we're going to move it down between the removal and the master affix. In this case, it is going to hide literally everything that is below it, because our master affix group is weirdly configured on its own, everything is going to be hidden, which is perfect. We can always have our master FX group ready to go here to duplicate and then drag above the hide all items. So we always have access to the FXs that we really need for the build, because that is going to come in very handy for the next steps that we're going to do. Now, after you duplicated the very first one, now is where the work basically comes into play. Now we're going to add all of the item bases into the master FX group. So for this, let's say we start out with swords, for example. And what I like to do is I also like to recolor the weapons, for example. The weapons for me in my head, they are purple, whatever. You don't need to do this. This is just a thing that I do. And now you're going to add another condition, which is the item type. We set swords. In this case, we are going to go to one-handed weapons, one-handed swords. And now we are going to make this even stricter by only showing the implicits that we really want. As I said, this is going to be the very first of your 3 filters that you are setting up. In this case, definitely include also some of the earlier bases, because you obviously cannot find a 75 base when you're just leveling up at around level 20 or so. So let's say you are leveling up, you really want to see this one is also great, and these guys, right? So now you have them in here, and now you're going to update this. You have now created a group that is going to filter by all of the affixes that you need, but they also now need to be a sword with the selected subtypes. In this case, we are going to duplicate this rule, and now we are going to make it a little bit stricter. What I like to do is I like to write the strict in the brackets behind this. I also copy this with the space so I don't have to redo this all the time. And now the next step, it's just one easy click. Now you're going to bump this up by 1. I also emphasize those, so I can instantly see which of them are going to be better, because they just have more affixes that I need on them by default. This is how you are now going to go through all of the item slots available to you. Next up, for example, you are going to go to daggers, right? Because your character needs swords and maybe also daggers. In this case, you're now going to duplicate the master FX group again, pull it up to where it belongs, right above where you left off. And now you're going to redo this. We said daggers. So now again, add condition, item type, one-handed weapons, daggers. And then we really want to have daggers that, let's say, I don't know, we really like the crit chance ones and the crises. Again, your Maxroll guide or your build guide is going to help you out here tremendously. Confirm. Again, for me, it's a weapon, so I recolor this and I put the purple on here, and now I rename this to dagger. Then I update this again, and now it's time to make this rule more strict by duplicating, adding our Control V with the strict here, but do not forget to update the affixes here and bump them up by 1. And this is literally what you go through all of the item slots. So next up would be your helmets, next up would be your chests, your rings, amulets, literally everything, until your filter looks a little bit more like this one, for example. And you can see it follows the same principle all of the time. It goes X strict, mace strict, sword strict. And then it goes through shield, helm, body armor, belt, and all of the other stuff. Now, if your filter now is completely full with that stuff, now let me go back to the test one so I can show this to you. What you're now going to do is you're going to add a rule. And this one is going to be our master FX group for the idols. In this case, we are now adding a condition that has the affixes on them, and now we're going to go only to the idols themselves. So now you're going to have a look at all the general idols that your build needs, for example, health, physical, health, whatever, and you pick and choose whatever your build needs. You're going to have a number between, I don't know, maybe 10 to 20, something like that. And then you're going to rename this, for example, idols. You can also, what I really like to do with idols, I always recolor them. For me, they are this green, for example. And then you're going to add those. Now, it's very important because you added that one. This one is going to be at the top. You need to move this one back to where it belongs. So basically above your chest armor or above your helmet, for example, or your jewelry. So what you need to add here is you have your master affixes for the idols, but you also only want to show the idols themselves, right? So you need the item types and you need the type, which in this case are going to be the idols. You can just click on this one right here. It's going to add all of the idols into this. And now you're done with that group. With that rule. Now we need to duplicate this because, again, right here as well, as always, we're going to make it just that little bit more strict with this one, bumping it up to 2 of the affixes that we selected and then emphasizing those. Now, what's really important here next is that when you are done with all of this, you now take the removal and shattering rules and put them down just above that hide all rule we created earlier. In this case, I'm going to move this one down. And then there is one little but very important last rule that we need to make. For this, we are going to duplicate our latest removal / shattering rune, and we are going to call it important affixes. At the very end of the removal and shattering, we leave the emphasize, and what you can do is you can also give it a different color if you really want to, something that you are not usually using, so you can instantly spot items that have very important affixes. Now again, this should have like 35 to 45 affixes for you, and now we're going to trim it down tremendously. We are gonna go and get rid of all of the stuff that is not omega important, for example, like the movement speed, for example, the resistances and armor, because you will have a lot of them already as affix shards, and this rule is basically only for the very important affixes that you don't have that many affix shards for. A very good example here is the hybrid health, for example. You could get rid of all of this and just leave the hybrid health here, and this group should ideally be somewhere between 4 and maybe a absolute maximum of 15, so that you can instantly spot the very important affixes that you need to shatter or remove accordingly. This is also why I really like to recolor it to blue, for example, so that I know when I see a blue item that is a very important affix, I need to have a look at this item. There is something very good in there, for example, like level 2 skills or the hybrid health, where you don't have as many affix shards and you are in dire need of making, stashing up on those for future uses. And depending on how far you actually are in the game, you can change the position of this important affix removal / shattering rule. If you don't really need the important affixes as much, which is going to be the case for the later filters we are going to make, then you can leave this at the bottom with the other recolor and shattering runes. But if you are just starting out, which is this first filter, what this first filter is for, then you ideally want to have this at the very top here, or below the unique set items, for example, because in this case, you will always spot the blue important affixes here. But the thing is, you will have to look for it very specifically, because this rule is now going to overwrite all of the rules that we did before. So there might be a dagger that is your perfect base and has maybe 2 or 3 very, very good stats on them, but it's not going to be colored in the purple that we said. It's instead now going to be blue. So when you have the blue rule up here, which you should, between levels 1 and 60, what this first filter is for, you will really need to double check these blue items in that case. Okay, so now that level 1 to 60 filter is completely set up and you are ready to go, the last steps are extremely easy and they don't take that much time. What you're going to do is you're going to duplicate the filter and you're now going to rename this. This was called test. Now we're going to add our stricter version to it, basically. And what this allows you is you can now swap between the filters every time you now feel, oh, okay, I'm seeing too many items that I don't really need anymore. Let's bump up the strictness a little bit. This is when you go from the normal one to the more strict one. And obviously, right now, there's absolutely no difference, but this is what we are going to do now. We're going to go into the just duplicated one, into the new one, into the strict one. And now you're going to go to the very bottom. You are going to keep the master affixes exactly the same. The hide all items, exactly the same. Removal and shattering rules, exactly the same. But what you're going to do is you're first of all going to figure out, are the important affixes that I have here in my blue removal / shattering group, do I have a lot of them or do I still need more? Depending on that, you either leave it at the very top if you still need more affix shards. If you don't, you're now going to put this to the other removal and shatterings, and that's it. Now, for the more tedious task a little bit, what you have to do is, when going into the stricter version, which is probably around level 60 plus or so, now you're going to pick every of the rules that have the item basis, and you're now going to manually bump up all of the numbers here by 1. So the first one goes to 2, and then the more strict one goes to 3. And this is what you do with all of the rules that you have set up. In this case, now the dagger goes, now the minimum amount of affixes from my big affix group that I want to see gets bumped up to 2 for the not so strict version, and then bumped up to 3 for the stricter version. Again, I did the same here, right? The not so strict version has 2, the stricter version has 3, and this is how I go through all of the rules. Chest, same thing, with at least 2 affixes, and the stricter one has the 3 affixes. This is exactly what you're going to go and do for all of the rules that you've set up. Maximum takes like 3 minutes or so, and then you are going to end up at the idols. On the idols, you don't really need to change anything because they are basically set up already for 1 and 2, and this is how you go. I would suggest for the strict version, you still keep the idols untouched. After that is done, you quickly need to check through the subtypes that you have selected for your filter and check if those are still okay. Ideally, you don't want to see the lower level ones again, so you just disable those and you make sure that all of the later game ones are enabled. What we're gonna do now is we are going to duplicate again, and now we're going to have a so-called uber strict version, which you should probably only use level 80 plus or so, or again, when you're just starting to find way too many items, picking up way too many items during your echo run. In this case, you can now bump it up from strict to uber strict in that case. And now we're going to do the same spiel again. Your removal shattering important affixes is probably already at the very bottom now. You have a lot of affixes due to your playtime a lot. And now you're going to go into all of the rules again and bump all the numbers right here up by 1. So in this case, you're going to go to 3. And on the stricter version, you're going to go to 4. And this is again what you're going to do for all of the things. And for example, for the armor as well, again, you do this for all of them, right? You're going to go through all of the normal ones, 3, all of the strict ones now go up to 4. And then again, I would only really go to that uber strict version when you basically pick everything that you pick up is a nothing burger anymore. That's exactly where you go and go to the uber strict version of the filter itself, maybe around level 80 or so. Now, this time, the idols, we are going to actually delete that first idle rule because obviously you're not really interested in just idols that have only 1 usable affix. So you can now, for the uber strict version, completely get rid of that. And now you're done. You have set up 3 item filters that are ascending strictness basically, and you can freely jump between these according to your level or by how much stuff, or you can judge by how much stuff is actually on the ground. Maybe you need to bump it up. Maybe you can also go back again, and you don't have to remember, oh, which setting did I actually just change? Oh God, hopefully I didn't break the filter now. This is where the duplicate button comes in clutch and is actually going to help you. And this is also future-proofing your item filters, because whenever you decide to play that certain build in a new season, you can just go back to this and say, oh, I'm level 1 now. Okay, here is my item filter that I set up last time. There's no big changes to the build. The master affix group is still fine. You can give it a quick look here at the master affixes at the bottom. You can still go through this and go like, yeah, this is still okay. This is still fine. There's nothing I need to add. And then you can instantly start playing again. And after you reach a certain threshold where you say like, yeah, I'm seeing way too many items, this is where you go and bump it up to strict. And then maybe around level 80 or so, you're also now finding way too much stuff. You're now going to go, oh, okay, now is the time. I need to bump up to uber strict. And yeah, I really hope this was helpful to you. If you have any questions whatsoever to this system or to anything Last Epoch related, I'm going to be live probably right now. So check out the Twitch link down in the description below. And if you like content similar to this, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel, and I'll see you next time.